All stories posted on our channel are stories from our subscribers and created by us based on real events we've experienced and witnessed. We post new stories every day for your entertainment, that we hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
The words hit me like a physical blow, delivered at close range with all the precision of someone who knew exactly where to strike. We were standing in the kitchen of the house we had shared for 11 years. The morning light streaming through windows that overlooked a backyard I had landscaped myself, illuminating a scene that would be seared into my memory forever. My name is Declan Shaw. I was 39 years old, an architect at a mid-sized firm in Denver, and until that Saturday morning in early October, I had believed that love, persistent, patient, unconditional love, could eventually heal any wound, bridge any distance, repair any damage. "Your love doesn't matter to me," Renata said, her voice rising to a pitch that made my ears ring. "No matter what you do, don't you understand? It doesn't matter. It has never mattered. You could love me for 100 years, and it wouldn't change anything." I stood motionless, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, trying to process what she was saying. This wasn't our first argument. Far from it. The past 3 years had been a gradual erosion of everything I thought our marriage represented, a slow-motion collapse that I had been desperately trying to prevent. But this felt different. This felt final. "Renata, I don't understand what you want from me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've tried everything. I've changed my schedule. I've gone to counseling. I've done everything you've asked. What more can I do?" "That's exactly the problem." She threw her hands up in frustration, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "You're always trying, always doing, always performing your love like it's some kind of show. But I don't feel it, Declan. I've never felt it. And I'm tired of pretending that your efforts mean anything to me." The cruelty of her words was breathtaking, not just their content, but their delivery. She wasn't angry in the way that people get angry during normal arguments, the heat of the moment causing them to say things they don't mean. She was calm beneath the volume, deliberate in her destruction, dismantling years of shared life with the efficiency of someone who had been planning this demolition for a long time. "You've never felt it," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "In 11 years of marriage, you've never felt my love?" "I felt something at the beginning. Attraction, maybe. Compatibility. You were stable, successful, the kind of man my parents approved of. But love?" She laughed, a bitter sound that contained no humor. "I don't think I've ever loved you, Declan. Not the way you love me. Not the way you deserve to be loved." I set down the coffee cup with careful precision, afraid that if I didn't control my movements, I would shatter something. The cup, the counter, myself. "Then why did you marry me? Why did you stay for 11 years? Because it was comfortable. Because you made it easy. Because I thought eventually I would feel what I was supposed to feel, and when I didn't, I told myself it didn't matter." She stopped pacing, facing me directly. "But it does matter. It matters because I've been living a lie, and I can't do it anymore." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It contained everything, all the years of effort, all the sacrifices, all the moments when I had chosen her needs over mine, believing that love meant putting another person first, all of it reduced to nothing by words she had apparently been holding back for over a decade. "So what do you want?" I asked. "A divorce?" "I don't know what I want. I just know I can't keep pretending that your love is enough when it isn't, when it never has been." Something shifted in me then, a tectonic movement, a fundamental rearrangement of priorities that I hadn't known was possible. For 3 years, I had been fighting to save this marriage. For 11 years before that, I had been building a life around a woman who, according to her own admission, had never loved me. I had poured my heart into a vessel that had been empty from the start. And suddenly I was done. "Okay," I said. Renata blinked, clearly expecting more argument, more pleading, more of the desperate attempts to fix things that had characterized my approach for years. "Okay, what?" "Okay, you're right. My love doesn't matter to you. It never has. I understand now. What are you saying?" I'm saying that I've spent 11 years trying to be enough for someone who was never going to be satisfied. I've bent myself into shapes I don't recognize, sacrificed things that mattered to me, put your happiness above my own at every turn, and none of it made a difference. Declan, no. You wanted honesty? Here it is. I love you. I have loved you for 11 years with everything I have, but you're right. It doesn't matter. Not because there's something wrong with my love, but because you were never capable of receiving it. I walked past her, out of the kitchen, up the stairs to our bedroom. I pulled a suitcase from the closet, the same suitcase I had used for countless business trips and family vacations, and began to pack. Not everything, just the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, the laptop I used for work, a few personal items that held meaning. Renata appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to something that might have been alarm. "What are you doing?" "Leaving." "Leaving? Just like that?" "Just like that." I continued packing, my movements calm and deliberate. "You told me my love doesn't matter. You told me it has never mattered. What reason do I have to stay? We need to talk about this. We need to figure out. We've been talking for 3 years. We've been in therapy. We've had countless conversations. We've tried everything I could think of to make this work. And you just told me that none of it mattered to you, so there's nothing left to figure out. You can't just leave." I stopped packing and turned to face her. "Why not? Give me one reason to stay, one genuine reason, not based on convenience or comfort or what other people will think." Renata opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. That's what I thought. I finished packing, zipped the suitcase, and carried it downstairs. Renata followed, her earlier anger replaced by something that looked almost like panic. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet." "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. You're my husband." "Am I?" "Because according to what you just said, I'm someone whose love you've never felt and never wanted. That doesn't sound like a husband to me. That sounds like a mistake you've been tolerating for 11 years. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, the same hook where they had hung every day of our married life. I looked around the house, the furniture we had chosen together, the artwork on the walls, the small decorative touches that made a house a home, and felt a strange detachment, as if I were already viewing it from a great distance. "I'll be in touch about the practical matters," I said, "the house, the accounts, whatever needs to be sorted out, but I won't be back tonight, or any night if I'm being honest." "Declan, please, this isn't what I wanted." "Then what did you want? To tell me that my love was worthless and have me thank you for your honesty? To destroy everything we've built and expect me to help you clean up the wreckage?" I shook my head. "I've done that for too long. I've made your feelings more important than my own for 11 years. That ends today." I walked out the front door into the October morning and didn't look back. I drove for 3 hours without destination, my mind simultaneously racing and empty. The Rocky Mountains rose on my left, their peaks already dusted with early snow, and I found myself heading west without any conscious decision, toward higher ground, toward solitude, toward something I couldn't name but desperately needed. Eventually, I pulled into a small mountain town I had visited years ago for a work retreat, Silverton, a former mining community that had reinvented itself as a tourist destination while retaining its authentic character. I found a bed and breakfast with a vacancy sign, paid for a week in advance, and carried my single suitcase up to a room that overlooked the main street. The room was simple, a bed, a dresser, a small desk by the window, but it was clean and quiet and entirely my own. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to understand what had just happened, what I had just done. I had left my wife. After 11 years of marriage, 3 years of trying to fix things, and a decade of believing that my love could eventually be enough, I had walked out the door and driven away. The enormity of it was almost impossible to comprehend. My phone had been buzzing with messages since I left. Renata, at first angry, "You can't just abandon me like this." Then confused, "Please tell me where you are." Then something approaching contrite, "I didn't mean for this to happen. Can we talk?" I read each message but didn't respond. I didn't know what to say, and for the first time in years, I felt no obligation to figure it out immediately. The silence of the room was profound. No television, no radio, no sounds of another person moving through shared space. I had been afraid of silence for years, filling every moment with activity or conversation or the background noise of a life that never stopped moving. Now the silence felt like a gift, a space in which I could finally hear my own thoughts. What were those thoughts? Confusion, certainly. Pain, though less than I might have expected. And beneath both, a strange sensation that took me a while to identify. Relief. I was relieved. The realization was shocking. I had spent 3 years fighting to save my marriage, had believed that losing Renata would be the worst thing that could happen to me. But now that the loss was happening, now that the fight was over, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. I thought about what Renata had said, that she had never loved me, that my love had never mattered to her. The words should have been devastating, and in some ways they were, but they also explained things that had never made sense before. The distance she maintained even in our closest moments. The way she responded to my expressions of love with tolerance rather than reciprocation. The subtle but persistent feeling that I was always trying too hard, giving too much, receiving too little in return. I hadn't been imagining things. The imbalance I had felt throughout our marriage was real, not because I wasn't trying hard enough, but because I was the only one truly trying at all. That evening, I walked down to a small restaurant on the main street and ordered dinner I barely tasted. The waitress was friendly without being intrusive. The other diners were tourists, enjoying the mountain scenery, and I sat in a corner booth watching normal life unfold while my own life lay in fragments. After dinner, I called my brother, Kieran, who lived in Seattle with his wife and 2 kids. We weren't especially close. The distance and the demands of our respective lives had attenuated our relationship, but he was the closest thing to a confidant I had. Declan. His voice was surprised. It's been months. What's going on? I left Renata. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. You left her? As in, the marriage is over? I think so, yes. What happened? I told him about the conversation, about Renata's declaration that my love had never mattered, about my decision to stop fighting for something that had apparently never existed. Jesus, Kieran said when I finished. That's brutal. Are you okay? I don't know. I think I'm still in shock, but also... And I searched for the right words. I feel lighter somehow, like I've been carrying something heavy for years and finally set it down. That makes sense. You've been miserable for a while. I could tell even through phone calls. I just didn't know it was this bad. Neither did I. Or maybe I did know and couldn't admit it. Where are you now? Silverton, a little mountain town a few hours from Denver. I needed space to think. Do you need me to come out there? The offer was genuine, and I appreciated it more than I could express. No, I think I need to be alone right now. But thank you. Call me if that changes, day or night. I will. After hanging up, I walked back to the bed and breakfast and climbed the stairs to my room. The night was cold, the sky clear, and through my window I could see more stars than I'd seen in years, the light pollution of Denver replaced by the ancient darkness of the mountains. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, in the unfamiliar silence, and tried to understand who I was now that I was no longer trying to be Renata's husband. The identity I had built over 11 years, devoted partner, tireless accommodator, the one who always put the relationship first, that identity was gone, dissolved by her words and my departure. What was left? I didn't know yet. But for the first time in a long time, I was curious to find out. I stayed in Silverton for 2 weeks, extending my original reservation as I realized I wasn't ready to return to Denver and face the practical realities of ending a marriage. I notified my firm that I needed personal leave, citing family emergency without elaborating, and they granted it with minimal questions, the benefits of being a reliable employee who had never asked for anything. During those 2 weeks, I did something I hadn't done in years. I thought about myself. Not about work or marriage or the expectations of others, but about who I was, what I wanted, what kind of life I would choose if I could choose freely. The exercise was harder than I expected. I had spent so long accommodating Renata's preferences that I had lost track of my own. What music did I like? What foods? What activities? In our marriage, all of these questions had been answered by what Renata wanted or what would cause the least conflict. My own preferences had been so thoroughly suppressed that I struggled to identify them. I started small. I ate meals that Renata would never have approved of, spicy foods she found distasteful, casual restaurants she considered beneath us. I listened to music she had always criticized, country and folk, and the acoustic singer-songwriters I had loved in college. I took long hikes in the mountains, something she had never enjoyed, and had therefore excluded from our shared life. Each small choice felt like an act of reclamation, a recovery of territory that had been occupied by another person's preferences. The cumulative effect was disorienting, but also liberating. I was discovering a version of myself that had been buried under years of compromise and accommodation. On my 8th day in Silverton, Renata called. I had been ignoring her texts, but something made me answer the phone. Declan. Her voice was different than it had been during our final argument, softer, more uncertain. Thank God. I've been so worried. I'm fine. Where are you? It doesn't matter. What do you want, Renata? I want to talk. I said things I shouldn't have said. I was upset, and I took it out on you. You said you never loved me. You said my love had never mattered. Were those things you shouldn't have said, or were they the truth you'd been hiding? The silence on her end was answer enough. That's what I thought. It's more complicated than that. Marriage is complicated. I was trying to explain how I felt, and it came out wrong. It came out exactly right. For the first time in 11 years, you told me the truth. You should be proud of that, not trying to take it back. I don't want this to be the end. We've built a life together. We can work through this. Can we? Can you learn to love me after 11 years of not loving me? Can you suddenly start valuing something you've dismissed as meaningless? I don't know, but I'm willing to try. The words were exactly what I would have wanted to hear a week ago, a month ago, at any point during the 3 years I had spent trying to save our marriage, but now they landed differently. Now I could hear them for what they were, an offer to continue the same pattern that had slowly eroded my sense of self, dressed up in language of effort and compromise. No, I said. No, I've spent 11 years trying, Renata, trying to be enough, trying to earn your love, trying to build something that would make you happy, and according to you, none of it worked, none of it mattered. Why would more trying produce a different result? Because I know what's at stake now. Because losing you has made me realize, what? That I was useful? That the life we built was comfortable? That starting over is scary? I could hear the edge in my voice, the accumulation of years of suppressed frustration finally finding release. Those aren't reasons to stay married. Those are reasons to be afraid of change, and I'm done making decisions based on fear. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. For the first time in our marriage, I'm telling you what I actually think instead of what will keep the peace. You said my love didn't matter. Fine. But that means your feelings don't get to determine my choices anymore. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm letting go. There's a difference. I ended the call and sat for a long time, staring at the mountains through my window. The conversation had been difficult, but it had also clarified something important. I wasn't going back. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be a return to the marriage I had left. That chapter was closed. The clarity was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I had spent 11 years building a life around someone who hadn't loved me. Now I had to build something new, something that was entirely my own. I didn't know what that would look like, but for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. I returned to Denver after 16 days in Silverton, ready to face the practical realities I had been avoiding. The house was empty when I arrived. Renata was at work, according to the schedule I still knew by heart, and I moved through the familiar rooms with the strange detachment of a visitor in a place he once called home. I packed more thoroughly this time, filling boxes with books, clothes, personal items, the accumulated possessions of a life that was ending. I left everything that was shared, the furniture, the artwork, the kitchen equipment, taking only what was unambiguously mine. The process took most of the day, and by the time Renata returned from work, I was loading the last boxes into my car. She stood in the driveway, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "You're really doing this," she said. "I'm really doing this. Where will you go?" "I found an apartment. It's small, but it's mine. We should talk about the house, about finances, about—" She trailed off, the practical realities of divorce apparently too overwhelming to enumerate. "I've already contacted a lawyer. She'll be in touch with your attorney once you have one. I'm not interested in fighting over assets. We can divide things fairly and move on. You've been planning this. I've been acting. There's a difference. 2 weeks ago I had no plan. Now I have the beginnings of one." Renata took a step toward me, her expression shifting to something softer. "Declan, I know I hurt you. I know what I said was terrible, but walking away isn't the answer. It's the only answer left. I've tried everything else. You haven't tried accepting that maybe we're different, that maybe love looks different for different people. I may not express it the way you do, but that doesn't mean—" "Stop." The word came out harder than I intended. "Stop trying to reframe what you said. You told me you never loved me. You told me my love didn't matter. Those aren't statements about different love languages or expression styles. Those are statements about the fundamental nature of our relationship. I was angry. People say things when they're angry. Yes, they do. They say the things they've been holding back, the truths they've been hiding. Your anger didn't create those feelings. It just removed the filter that had been concealing them." Renata's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw something genuine beneath the careful composure she usually maintained. Pain, confusion, the dawning realization that she had broken something that couldn't be repaired. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "You can't fix it. Neither can I. All we can do is accept that it's broken and figure out how to move forward separately. Is that what you want? To be alone? I don't know what I want. I've spent 11 years wanting what you wanted, or what I thought would make you happy. Now I need to figure out what I actually want for myself. And there's no room for me in that process. No, not right now. Maybe not ever." I finished loading the car and stood facing her across the driveway that had once represented the home we were building together. The late afternoon light was golden, the kind of light that makes everything look beautiful and temporary. "I'm sorry," Renata said, "for all of it, for not being able to love you the way you deserved. I'm sorry too, for not seeing the truth sooner, for spending years trying to earn something that was never available. We didn't embrace. We didn't exchange any final words of affection or hope." I got in my car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as Renata stood alone in the driveway of the house that was no longer ours. The apartment I had rented was in a different part of Denver, far from the neighborhoods Renata and I had frequented. It was small, a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days, but it was clean and affordable and entirely my own. I spent the first evening unpacking, arranging my few possessions in the limited space, trying to make the apartment feel like home. The effort was only partially successful. Home, I was discovering, was more about psychology than geography, and my psychology was still in transition. That night I sat by the window that overlooked a parking lot and a strip of grass that the building management called a courtyard. It wasn't the mountain view of Silverton, and it wasn't the landscape backyard of my former home. It was something new, something uncertain, something that would become whatever I made of it. I was alone for the first time in 11 years. The solitude was profound, not just the absence of another person, but the absence of the constant negotiation that had characterized my marriage. No one to consult about dinner, about plans, about how to spend an evening. No one's preferences to accommodate, no one's moods to manage, no one's expectations to meet. The freedom was disorienting. I had forgotten how to make decisions based solely on my own desires, but I was learning, one small choice at a time. I ordered pizza. Renata had always considered delivery food a moral failing and ate it straight from the box, while watching a movie she would have dismissed as juvenile. The pizza was mediocre, and the movie was forgettable, but both were entirely my choice, and that made them satisfying in ways that transcended their actual quality. This was my life now. Small, uncertain, but authentically mine. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Renata, perhaps recognizing that prolonging the process would only extend the pain, agreed to my proposed division of assets without significant negotiation. The house would be sold, the proceeds split equally, our savings would be divided, our retirement accounts would be separated according to the standard formulas. Within 3 months, the legal dissolution of our 11-year marriage was finalized. The emotional dissolution took longer. I threw myself into work, using the demanding projects at my firm as a distraction from the emptiness I felt during evenings and weekends. My colleagues noticed the change, the increased hours, the intensity I brought to design challenges that had previously been routine, but they attributed it to ambition rather than avoidance. Only my office friend, Helena Vasquez, saw through the facade. "You're hiding in work," she said one evening, appearing at my desk as I reviewed blueprints for a project that wasn't due for weeks. "I've seen it before. Classic post-divorce behavior." Helena was in her late 40s, twice divorced herself, and possessed the kind of hard-won wisdom that came from surviving experiences she wouldn't have chosen. "I'm not hiding. I'm being productive. You're here at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, working on a project that could wait until Monday. If that's not hiding, what is?" I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. What am I supposed to do instead? Go home to an empty apartment, sit alone, and think about everything I've lost? You could do what most people do after divorce. Process your feelings, reconnect with friends, figure out who you are outside of the relationship. I'm not sure I know how to do any of those things. That's exactly why you need to do them. Helena pulled up a chair and sat across from me. "I've been where you are. After my first divorce, I worked 80-hour weeks for 6 months. It felt productive, but it was really just a way of avoiding the grief. When I finally crashed, the grief was still there, waiting for me. So what did you do?" "I fell apart for a while. Then I put myself back together. But the falling apart had to happen first. There was no way around it." "That sounds terrible." It was terrible, but it was also necessary. You can't build something new on top of rubble. You have to clear the site first. I thought about her words for a long time after she left. She was right. I was hiding in work, using productivity as a shield against feelings I wasn't ready to confront. But Helena was also describing a process I didn't know how to engage in. How did one fall apart? How did one clear the rubble of an 11-year marriage? The answer, I discovered, was that you didn't plan it. It just happened. The crash came on a Sunday afternoon, 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. I had been doing fine, or what passed for fine in my new reality, when I walked past a restaurant where Renata and I had celebrated our 5th anniversary. The memory hit me without warning. The two of us at a corner table, sharing a bottle of wine, talking about the future we were building together. I had been so happy that night, so certain that our love would only grow stronger with time, and it had all been a lie. She had never loved me, had been tolerating my devotion while privately wishing for something else. Every memory of happiness was now shadowed by that knowledge, every moment of connection revealed as unilateral. I made it back to my apartment before the tears came. They came hard and fast, the accumulated grief of 11 years releasing in a flood I couldn't control. I cried for the marriage I had lost, for the time I had wasted, for the person I had become in my efforts to be enough for someone who couldn't be satisfied. I cried for hours, until I was empty, until there was nothing left but exhaustion and a strange, tentative peace. Helena had been right. The falling apart was terrible, but when it was over, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Space. Space to breathe, to think, to imagine possibilities that had been crowded out by grief and denial. The rubble wasn't fully cleared, that would take more time. But I had made a start, and for the first time since leaving Renata, I felt ready to build something new. The months that followed were a slow process of reconstruction, each day bringing small discoveries about who I was and who I wanted to become. I started with the basics, establishing routines that were mine alone, decorating my apartment according to my own taste, rather than some imagined compromise. I bought artwork I genuinely liked, arranged furniture for my comfort rather than theoretical guests, filled my kitchen with foods I enjoyed without worrying whether they met someone else's standards. The changes were small, but their cumulative effect was significant. Each choice I made for myself was a declaration of independence, a rejection of the accommodating mindset that had defined my marriage. I also started reaching out to people I had neglected during my years with Renata. Old friends who had drifted away, colleagues I had kept at professional distance, family members I had seen only at obligatory gatherings. The reconnections were awkward at first. I had been absent for so long that I wasn't sure how to return. But most people were welcoming, understanding that marriages sometimes consumed the individuals within them. My brother Kieran visited in February, flying in from Seattle for a long weekend. We hiked in the mountains, drank beer at local breweries, and talked more honestly than we had in years. "You seem different," he said during a quiet moment at a mountain overlook. "More present, more yourself. I feel different, like I'm finally waking up from a long sleep." Was the marriage that bad? I knew things were difficult, but I didn't realize. It wasn't bad in obvious ways. There was no abuse, no dramatic conflicts. It was just empty. I was pouring love into something that could never fill up, and I didn't see it because I was too busy pouring. That sounds exhausting. It was. I just didn't realize how exhausted I was until I stopped. Kieran was quiet for a moment, looking out at the snow-capped peaks. "I've been thinking about my own marriage," he said, "about whether I'm making the same mistakes." And? I don't think so. Not the same mistakes anyway. Probably different ones. He smiled ruefully. But talking to you has made me pay more attention, made me appreciate what I have while I have it. That's good. That's what love is supposed to be. Mutual, reciprocal, something both people are building together, not one person trying to build while the other watches. Is that what happened with Renata? That's exactly what happened. I just couldn't see it until she told me directly. The weekend with Kieran was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Not just the connection with my brother, but the reminder that healthy relationships existed, that love could be mutual and supportive rather than unilateral and draining. I started dating in March, tentatively, with the caution of someone still nursing wounds. The first few dates were disasters, awkward conversations, incompatible personalities, the general difficulty of trying to present yourself to strangers while still figuring out who you are. But gradually, I learned. I learned how to talk about my divorce without dwelling on it. I learned how to recognize the qualities I was looking for in a partner. I learned that attraction was important, but so was compatibility, mutual respect, the ability to communicate honestly without fear of reprisal. I met several women who were interesting but not right, shared pleasant evenings that led nowhere, experienced the particular loneliness of dating in middle age. But I also learned something valuable from each encounter, what I wanted, what I didn't want, who I was becoming in this new chapter of my life. The rebuilding was slow, but it was happening. Day by day, choice by choice, I was constructing a life that was authentically mine. I met Corinne Blackwood at a community volunteer event in April, a Habitat for Humanity build that my firm had organized as part of our civic engagement program. She was working on the same framing crew, her competence with power tools suggesting experience I hadn't expected from her professional appearance. "You know what you're doing," I observed as she made a precise cut with a circular saw. "My dad was a contractor. I grew up on job sites." She smiled, pushing safety goggles up onto her forehead. "I'm Corinne. You're one of the architects, right?" "Declan Shaw." And yes, though I'm better at drawing buildings than actually constructing them. Most architects are. That's why they hire contractors. We worked together throughout the afternoon, the physical labor creating a camaraderie that would have taken weeks to develop in ordinary social circumstances. By the end of the day, I knew that Corinne was a 42-year-old urban planner for the city of Denver, that she had never been married but had ended a long-term relationship 2 years ago, and that she had a dry sense of humor that emerged unexpectedly and delighted me every time. I also knew that I was attracted to her in a way I hadn't felt since before my marriage ended, not just physically, but intellectually, emotionally. There was something about her self-possession, her competence, her willingness to speak directly without the careful hedging that characterized so many interactions that drew me in. "Would you want to get dinner sometime?" I asked, as we were cleaning up at the end of the day. The question came out more nervously than I intended. Dating after divorce apparently hadn't restored my confidence in this particular arena. Corinne looked at me appraisingly. "I don't date recently divorced men. Too much baggage, too much potential for being a rebound. My divorce was finalized 6 months ago, and I've been working through the baggage. I have a therapist and everything." She laughed. "A therapist and everything? That's quite the sales pitch." "I'm not trying to pitch. I'm just being honest. I like talking to you. I'd like to do more of it. But I understand if you have reservations." Corinne was quiet for a moment, considering. "How about coffee? Dinner feels like pressure." "Coffee is just two people enjoying caffeine in each other's company. Coffee sounds perfect." We met 3 days later at a small cafe near her office. The conversation flowed easily, moving from our professional lives to our personal histories, with the natural progression of people genuinely interested in knowing each other. I told her about Renata, about the marriage that had ended, about the revelation that had finally made me leave. "She told you your love didn't matter?" Corinne's expression was somewhere between sympathy and incredulity. "After 11 years? Those were her exact words. 'Your love doesn't matter to me, no matter what you do.' That's brutal." It was, but it was also clarifying. I had spent years suspecting that something was wrong, that the love wasn't flowing in both directions. Having it confirmed, as painful as it was, finally gave me permission to stop trying. "How are you doing now, honestly?" "Honestly, better than I expected. The first few months were hard, really hard, but I've been doing the work, therapy, self-reflection, reconnecting with people I had neglected. I'm not the same person I was in my marriage, and I think that's probably a good thing." Corinne nodded slowly. "That's a mature way of looking at it. Most people I know who've gone through divorce are either still bitter or pretending everything's fine. I've been both of those at different times, but I'm trying to get to something more sustainable." "And what's that?" "I don't know exactly, but I think it involves being more honest about what I want and not settling for relationships that don't nourish me." "That sounds healthy. It's a work in progress." "No." The coffee date extended into lunch, and lunch extended into a walk through the city, and by the time we parted ways, I knew that whatever reservations Corinne had about dating recently divorced men had been at least partially overcome. "I had a good time," she said, as we stood on the corner where our paths diverged. "So did I. Can I see you again?" "I think so. Yes." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "But let's take it slow. I've learned the hard way that rushing things doesn't end well. Slow sounds perfect." My relationship with Corinne developed over the following months with a patience I hadn't known I possessed. We saw each other once or twice a week, sometimes for elaborate dates and sometimes for simple evenings cooking dinner at one of our apartments. We talked about our pasts without dwelling on them, shared our hopes for the future without demanding commitments, learned each other's quirks and preferences with the careful attention of people who had been hurt before and were determined not to repeat the same mistakes. What struck me most was how different this felt from my marriage. With Renata, I had always been performing, trying to be the husband she wanted, the partner who met her expectations, the person who could finally earn the love she was withholding. With Corinne, I felt able to simply be myself, without performance or pretense. The difference was partly about Corinne's character, her directness, her lack of hidden agendas, her willingness to communicate openly about what she was feeling. But it was also about me. I had changed through the experience of my marriage and divorce. I was no longer willing to subordinate my needs to someone else's, no longer afraid that being authentic would drive people away. "You're different from the men I usually date," Corinne told me one evening as we sat on her balcony watching the sunset. "More present, more genuine." I learned some hard lessons about what happens when you're not present or genuine. It took losing my marriage to understand what I was doing wrong. What were you doing wrong? Trying to be enough for someone who was never going to be satisfied, putting her needs above mine so consistently that I lost track of what my needs actually were. I paused, considering. I think I was afraid that if I was truly myself, she would leave. So I performed a version of myself that I thought she wanted. And she left anyway. She didn't leave. I left. But only after she made it clear that the performance had never worked, that she had never loved the person I was pretending to be, let alone the person I actually was. That's painful. It was. But it was also liberating. Once I understood that performing didn't work, I could stop doing it. I could just be myself and let the chips fall where they may. Corinne reached over and took my hand. "I like who you actually are. In case that wasn't clear, it's clear. And it means more than you know." The relationship deepened through summer and into fall. We met each other's families, her parents in Boulder, my brother Kieran during another visit from Seattle. We introduced each other to our friend circles, integrated our lives in the gradual way that serious relationships require. And throughout it all, I kept doing the internal work that my therapist had recommended, processing the grief of my failed marriage, examining the patterns that had led me to stay so long, developing the self-awareness necessary to build healthier relationships in the future. "You're making good progress," Dr. Elaine Matsumoto said during one of our sessions. "The person you are now is significantly different from the person who walked into my office 10 months ago. Different how? More grounded, less anxious about pleasing others at the expense of yourself, more capable of recognizing your own needs and communicating them clearly." Is that because of the therapy or because of the new relationship? Both, probably. The therapy gives you tools. The relationship gives you opportunities to use them. They reinforce each other. I worry sometimes that I'm repeating old patterns, that I'm just performing again, pretending to be healthy when I'm actually still broken. What makes you think you might be pretending? I don't know. Fear, maybe. Fear that I haven't really changed, that I'm incapable of having a healthy relationship, that eventually Corinne will see through whatever facade I've constructed. And what evidence do you have that you are pretending? I thought about the question. None, actually. Everything with Corinne feels genuine, more genuine than my marriage ever felt. But the fear is still there. Fear can be a residue of trauma, not an indicator of current reality. Your marriage taught you to be afraid of authenticity, to believe that being yourself would lead to rejection, that fear doesn't disappear just because your circumstances have changed. So what do I do with it? Acknowledge it, notice when it arises, and then act according to your values rather than your fears. 1 year after I had walked out of my marriage, Renata called. I hadn't heard from her since the divorce was finalized. We had no children, no shared obligations that required continued contact, and seeing her name on my phone was disorienting, a message from a past I had been working to leave behind. "Declan." Her voice was different than I remembered, softer, less defensive. "Thank you for answering. What do you want, Renata?" "To talk, to apologize properly this time. I've been in therapy, working through some things, and I realized I never really told you how sorry I was. You apologized when I was leaving. I said words that sounded like an apology, but I wasn't really sorry then. I was just scared of being alone. Now I'm actually sorry, and I wanted you to hear it." I sat down on my couch, trying to process this unexpected intrusion. Corinne was at her own apartment tonight, We had decided early in our relationship that maintaining separate spaces was important for our independence. Now I was grateful for that decision. This conversation needed to happen in private. "I'm listening," I said. "I was cruel to you, not just that last day, but throughout our marriage. I withheld love that you deserved, criticized you for trying too hard, when trying hard was exactly what a good partner does, made you feel inadequate for things that had nothing to do with your actual inadequacies. Why? Because I was unhappy with myself, and blaming you was easier than examining my own problems, because I had issues with intimacy that I didn't understand and couldn't acknowledge. Because you were so willing to accept blame that it became a habit to give it to you." That's a lot of self-awareness for 1 year of therapy. "It's been an intense year," she laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Losing you forced me to look at things I'd been avoiding. Turns out there's a lot to look at." "So what now? You're calling to apologize. And then what?" "And then nothing. I'm not calling to ask for another chance. I know that's not possible. I'm calling because my therapist says I need to make amends for the harm I've caused, and you were the person I harmed most. Making amends for your sake, not for mine. Both, hopefully, but yes, primarily for mine. I need to acknowledge what I did in order to move past it." I thought about how to respond. The anger I might have felt a year ago had dissipated, replaced by something closer to resignation. Renata had hurt me, profoundly, perhaps permanently, but she was also a person struggling with her own demons, seeking healing through whatever path presented itself. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally. "I don't know if I can say I forgive you. That word feels too big for what you're asking, but I can say I understand, and I wish you well in your recovery. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, but it's what I can offer. Are you happy? I hear you're seeing someone. How do you know that? Denver isn't that big. Mutual acquaintances talk. I am happy, happier than I was in our marriage, though I understand now that happiness was never really possible there. Because of me, because of both of us. I had my own problems, my need to be needed, my willingness to accept less than I deserved. You were just the person who enabled those problems. That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one. I've spent a year examining my own role in what happened. It's easier to blame you entirely, but it's not accurate." Renata was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you're happy. I mean that. I wasn't capable of making you happy, but I'm glad someone else is. Thank you. Take care of yourself, Declan. You too." I hung up and sat in the silence of my apartment, processing the conversation. I had expected contact from Renata to destabilize me, to reawaken old pain, to trigger the anxious patterns I had been working to overcome. Instead, I felt surprisingly calm, even settled. The past was the past. Renata had apologized, had acknowledged her role in our failed marriage, had wished me well in my new life. None of that changed what had happened, but it provided a kind of closure that I hadn't known I needed. I called Corinne and told her about the conversation. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Okay, actually. Better than okay. Like a door that's been slightly ajar finally closed completely." "That's good. I was worried when you said she called. So was I for a moment, but it turns out I've done more healing than I realized. The conversation that would have devastated me a year ago just didn't. That's progress. It really is. 18 months after my divorce, Corinne and I moved in together. The decision came naturally, evolving from the increasing amount of time we spent at each other's apartments to a conversation about efficiency, to the realization that we wanted to share our daily lives in a more permanent way. The apartment we found was larger than either of our previous spaces, a 2-bedroom in a renovated building near downtown, with enough room for both of us to have space of our own while still living together. We spent weeks choosing furniture, arguing about paint colors, learning the small negotiations that cohabitation required. "This is different from living alone," Corinne observed one evening as we navigated the complicated logistics of who used the bathroom first in the morning. "Different good or different bad?" Different. I got used to having my own space, my own routines. Sharing those with someone else takes adjustment. Do you regret it? No, not at all. But I want us to be honest about the adjustments, not pretend everything is seamless when it's not. Her directness was one of the things I loved most about her, the willingness to name difficulties rather than letting them fester. It was so different from my experience with Renata, where problems had been avoided until they became catastrophes. I appreciate that, I said, and I want the same thing. If something's bothering you, tell me. If I'm falling into old patterns, call me out. Guess what old patterns? Accommodating too much, putting your needs above mine until resentment builds. The things I did in my marriage that contributed to its failure. Have you noticed yourself doing those things? Not yet, but I'm watching for them. My therapist says that patterns don't disappear just because you're aware of them. They have to be actively resisted. Okay, I'll watch for them too. And you do the same for me. I have my own patterns that aren't always healthy. Like what? Like withdrawing when I'm upset instead of talking. Like assuming the worst about people's intentions. Like being so independent that I don't let people help me when I need it. Those don't seem like terrible patterns. They've caused problems in past relationships. I'm trying to do better. We're both trying to do better. That's what matters. The cohabitation experiment proceeded with the expected mixture of smooth adjustments and minor conflicts. We learned each other's habits more intimately than dating had allowed, the way Corinne needed quiet in the morning before she could fully function, the way I tended to retreat into work when I was stressed. We negotiated compromises that felt fair to both of us, communicated about frustrations before they became serious, built the shared life that requires constant attention and maintenance. I've been thinking about something, I said one evening, about 3 months after we moved in together. What's that? About whether you want to get married. Eventually, I mean, not right now. Corinne looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. That's a big question. I know, and I'm not proposing. I want to be clear about that. I'm just wondering where you stand on the possibility. After your experience with marriage, you want to do it again? I want to do it right. What happened with Renata wasn't about marriage itself. It was about marrying the wrong person for the wrong reasons. I think marriage with the right person for the right reasons could be wonderful. And you think I might be the right person? I think you might be. I want to find out. Corinne was quiet for a long moment. I've avoided marriage deliberately, she said finally. I watched my parents' marriage struggle, watched friends go through divorces, and decided I didn't want to risk it. But being with you has made me reconsider. Reconsider how? Reconsider whether the risk is worth taking, whether the potential rewards outweigh the potential pain. She reached for my hand. I'm not ready to say yes to marriage, but I'm not saying no either. I'm saying, let's keep building what we're building and see where it goes. That's all I'm asking. 2 years after leaving my marriage, I stood in a small church in Boulder, watching Corinne walk toward me in a dress that took my breath away. We had decided to get married in the spring, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us, her parents, my brother and his family, the friends who had supported us through our respective recoveries. The ceremony was simple and personal, with vows we had written ourselves, rather than the traditional words that felt too generic for what we were building together. Declan, Corinne said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. 2 years ago, I wasn't sure I would ever want this. Wasn't sure I was capable of the vulnerability that marriage requires. But you showed me that love could be different from what I had feared. You showed me that partnership didn't mean losing yourself, that commitment didn't mean constraint. You showed me that it was possible to be fully seen by another person and still be loved. Corinne, I responded, my own voice thick with emotion. I came to you from the wreckage of a marriage that had taught me all the wrong lessons about love. I thought love meant performing, accommodating, being less than myself in hopes of being acceptable. You taught me that real love works the opposite way, that the more fully I am myself, the more deeply I can connect with you. The vows continued, each of us promising not just the traditional commitments, love, honor, faithfulness, but the specific things we had learned mattered: honesty about our feelings, respect for each other's independence, willingness to name problems before they grew too large. When the officiant pronounced us married, I felt something I hadn't felt during my first wedding: certainty. Not the naive certainty of youth, which believes love conquers all, but the seasoned certainty of experience, which knows that love requires work and chooses to do that work every day. The reception was held at a restaurant overlooking the mountains. Kieran gave a toast that referenced my journey from the broken man who had called him from a hotel room in Silverton to the confident partner I had become. Eleanor, who had been promoted to my closest friend during the past 2 years, gave a toast that roasted my early dating disasters while celebrating the success I had finally achieved. And through it all, Corinne was beside me, my wife, my partner, the person who had shown me that love could be mutual, reciprocal, nourishing rather than draining. "Are you happy?" she asked during a quiet moment, as we stood on the restaurant's patio watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "Happier than I've ever been. No regrets about doing this again, about risking another marriage. The only risk would have been not doing this, not committing fully to what we have, because I was afraid of repeating past mistakes. We might still make mistakes. We definitely will. But there'll be new mistakes made by two people who are doing their best to love each other well. That's all anyone can do. It's everything. It's more than enough." 5 years after Renata had told me my love didn't matter, I sat on the patio of the house Corinne and I had purchased together, watching our daughter take her first unsteady steps across the grass. Eloise was 11 months old. A miracle neither of us had expected, but both of us had embraced with the enthusiasm of people who understood how precious, unlikely gifts could be. Corinne had been 45 when we discovered the pregnancy. Late by any measure, but not impossibly so. The pregnancy had been healthy, the delivery uncomplicated, and the result was this small person who had transformed our lives in ways we were still discovering. "She's going to walk before she crawls," Corinne observed from the chair beside me. "That's some kind of metaphor, I think." "For what?" "For us, maybe. Skipping the normal progression, going straight to what works." I laughed. "I'm not sure our progression skipped anything. We definitely crawled before we walked." "Fair point, but we got there eventually." We watched Eloise navigate the lawn with the determined concentration of someone learning a skill that would serve her for a lifetime. She fell, pushed herself up, tried again. The resilience of children, their willingness to fail repeatedly in pursuit of mastery, was something I was learning from anew. The years since our wedding had brought changes I couldn't have predicted. My career had evolved, leading to a partnership at the firm and a series of projects that brought genuine satisfaction. Corinne had been promoted to lead her department's urban planning initiatives, shaping the future of Denver in ways that would outlast both of us. We had traveled together, fought and reconciled, deepened our understanding of each other through the daily work of marriage, and we had become parents, a development that still amazed me when I stopped to think about it. At 44, I had assumed that chapter was closed. The children would never be part of my story. Eloise had rewritten that assumption, adding dimensions to my life I hadn't known were possible. "I think about Renata sometimes," I said, the words emerging unexpectedly. Corinne looked at me, her expression curious, but not concerned. We had reached the point in our relationship where mentions of my ex-wife were just historical references, not threats. "What do you think about?" "About what would have happened if I had stayed. If I had kept trying, kept accommodating, kept hoping that eventually my love would be enough. You would have been miserable. I would have been. But I might have convinced myself that misery was normal, that marriages were supposed to be difficult, that my unhappiness was just the price of commitment. But you didn't. I didn't. Because she said those words, 'Your love doesn't matter to me,' and something finally broke. Or maybe something finally healed. I couldn't tell the difference at the time." Corinne reached over and took my hand. "You've told me this story before, but I don't mind hearing it again." I tell it because I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget how close I came to spending my whole life in a marriage that was slowly draining me. I don't want to forget that leaving was an option, even when it seemed impossible. You're not going to forget. Probably not. But the telling helps. Eloise completed a successful journey across the grass and reached the edge of the flower bed, where she stopped to examine a daisy with the intense focus of someone encountering miracles for the first time. I watched her, this small person who existed because I had finally loved myself enough to leave someone who couldn't love me back, and felt gratitude so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. "What's wrong?" Corinne asked. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. That's what's overwhelming." She squeezed my hand. "I know what you mean. Sometimes I look at our life and can't believe it's real, can't believe I get to have this. We almost didn't. Both of us almost settled for less than this. But we didn't. No, we didn't." The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in colors that never failed to move me, no matter how many times I witnessed them. Eloise was laughing at something. The movement of a butterfly, maybe, or just the general delight of being alive. Corinne was beside me, warm and present and fully mine. 5 years ago, I had walked out of a house where I wasn't loved, driven into the mountains without a destination, and begun the long process of rebuilding a life from the rubble of one that hadn't worked. Now I was sitting in the house I had built with someone who loved me as much as I loved her, watching our daughter discover the world, feeling the particular gratitude that comes from knowing how easily things could have been different. Renata had told me my love didn't matter. She had been wrong, not about how she felt, but about what those feelings implied. My love did matter. It just needed to be given to someone capable of receiving it. I had found that person. We had built this life. And every day, I woke up knowing that the best decision I had ever made was walking out the door when someone told me I wasn't enough. Because I was enough. I had always been enough. I just needed to find someone who could see it.